This is part 12 in a series of videos on how weird the Marvel Universe would be if John F. Kennedy was assassinated in 1946. The rules of time travel in the Marvel Universe are incredibly inconsistent. Sometimes you get a Legion Quest Age of Apocalypse, where messing with the past creates an alternate timeline, but doesn't necessarily erase or alter the existing timeline. But sometimes it seems like it's a predestination situation, like in Uncanny X-Men -1, where Tanya Trask, who I recently talked about in a video you should watch, wanted to prevent her father and brother from unleashing the Sentinels against mutant kind. Rachel Summers convinces her this is folly, but their battle convinces Bolivar Trask mutants are dangerous. Tanya's interference didn't create an alternate timeline. Her interference always happened in that timeline, because she knew the Sentinels would be a whole thing, and they were because of her, or at least she helped them along. Her father was already in the process of unleashing them. Do you have a headache yet? Kang the Conqueror tells the Avengers if Iron Lad never became Kang, the Avengers' history will change. The alternate diverging timeline but the main timeline is okay isn't a thing here, at least according to Kang. And while he is a scoundrel, I see no reason he would lie, and in fact I see no reason he could be lying, as the present is changing, and I'm not sure how Kang could be responsible for that, or why he would want his younger self to become Kang if the diverging timeline theory is a thing. He'd have no reason to be invested in this, as his own past would still be fine. But the official Marvel website says Kang's actions create variants of himself who sometimes impede his goals, so I guess we're back to the main timeline is okay with lots of diverging timelines again. Realistically, with so many cooks in the kitchen, it's impossible to remain consistent on something like this. It's impossible for a creator to have read every comic book and stick to what was established in each one. Despite us nerds looking at continuity as if this is a real world and treating it as such, the truth is this is all made up and by lots of people. Eventually, someone is going to flub. In part 1 of this series, in this reality, circa 3000 BC, Rama-Tut's illegitimate son Ramades started a revolution, and Rama-Tut was killed. I was going by the Young Avengers rules. If something happens to an earlier version of Kang, that dominoes across time. This is how it's worked in this whole series of videos. It was only after I made that video that I found out Kang secretly helped Professor Phineas Horton build the original Human Torch. The Human Torch exists in this reality, so maybe a Kang from an alternate reality came here, saw his counterpart was dead, tried to meddle in the timeline a little, but had to go back home and deal with some other stuff. Yeah, that's my story and I'm sticking to it. But mostly, this world has seen very little Kang action. In the Al Ewing Ram V Venom run, Eddie Brock basically becomes immortal, and there are 5 or 6 different versions of him spanning millennia. It was Kang who taught Eddie how to master time travel and become Meridius, the big villain of that Venom run. No Kang, no Meridius messing with present-day Eddie, no Eddie doing a time travel team-up with Dr. Doom where they ended up in 1942. Eddie used his King in Black power to summon a symbiote, 1940 superhero Flexo, who had been programmed to kill Adolf Hitler. Eddie's meddling meant Hitler lived. Flexo is put in suspended animation because it failed to follow orders, and as far as Eddie was concerned, World War II was prolonged a few more years because of him. I don't think we can entirely blame World War II lasting until 45 on Eddie. Real talk, if Project Valkyrie had succeeded, I don't think that would have fixed the world's problems. There were lots of moving pieces in World War II. If you removed Hitler, Himmler or Goebbels would have stepped in to continue the madness. When Eddie didn't prevent Flexo from fulfilling his objective, Hitler dies in 42, but the war continues. Hitler doesn't order the Red Skull to take care of the Russian eugenics program in 44. Without Hitler holding Red Skull's leash, he's focusing his attention on other aspects of the war and doesn't eliminate the scientists and these families who are meant to become above-average humans of the next generation. I won't say superhuman, as that terminology was never used by Hitler or the Red Skull. Very strong and athletic, like Silver Age Captain America. That's almost certainly what the Russians were working on. The young ladies who showed promise were taken to the Red Room, bolstering the ranks of the Black Widows, and Alexei Lebedev, the first Red Guardian, is tasked with training the boys, looking to see who might be an ideal candidate to follow in his footsteps someday. Much like on Earth 616, Red Guardian doesn't like the brutal experiments used in the Super Soldier program and is allegedly killed. I love allegedly. Allegedly means maybe he's alive. Maybe he pulled an Oscar Schindler and got some of these youths to safety before his government tried to have him killed. Maybe he kept a low profile, used his abilities to save lives here and there, but couldn't be too loud about it, couldn't be as much of a hero as he would have liked, or else he would have died for real. We don't know how many perspective enhanced humans the Russians had in the 40s. Could have been 3 or 4, could have been a few dozen. Even if it was quite a few, it's likely some of them proved to to not be ideal for Russia's purposes of going toe-to-toe against the rest of the world. We see that in the American Super Soldier program. This one isn't mentally what we're looking for. This one got injured. Even if we still had a dozen possible future Guardians or Black Widows in this group, the 1950s would go on to be more or less the same as the 1950s of Earth 616, as these kids would have been very young at the end of the war and wouldn't have been old enough to have an impact on the timeline in the 1950s, with one exception. Even if there was just one or two kids who met and exceeded the Russian government's expectations, one of them would have been chosen to become the next Red Guardian, not Alexei Shostakov. Shostakov was an exceptional pilot for Russia to want to turn him into their equivalent of Captain America, but that requires a lot of time and effort, which they don't have to expend in this timeline, as they've already got kids they've been training for years. This brings us to an alien race attacking Earth in 1962. We saw 15 ships in this panel, and I posited the aliens would have targeted Earth's 15 most populous cities, including Moscow. Our almost super soldiers happened to be in Moscow, keeping an eye on Alexander Vazhin from X-Men Origins Colossus. I'm not sure what was going on with this guy. Not counting foreign language reprints or trade paperback collections, he's only appeared in one issue. I'm 50% sure the creators behind this issue meant for this to be Alexei Vazhin, who also works in Russian intelligence. Vazhin isn't a common name. Top Google result is this guy. It's not like two John Smiths, same name, different guys. These names are so similar, and they're in the same line of work, with this guy becoming the director of Russian intel by the end of his sole appearance. But there's just enough evidence to say he's a different guy. He looks different, but Mr. and Mrs. Rasputin look different here than in Giant Size X-Men 1, so you could say artistic license. But the other Vazhin had grandkids by the time we get to Extreme X-Men. Vazhin from X-Men Origins Colossus went to school with Mikhail Rasputin. We don't know how old Mikhail was, but old enough to become a cosmonaut when Peter's mutant abilities hadn't manifested yet, so not old enough for him to have grandkids. But I just can't get away from extremely similar names and professions. So let's try this. The name was misspelled in X-Men Origins Colossus. This is this guy's son.
To make a long story short, too late.
Vazhin Jr. witnessed Peter's mutant abilities manifest for the first time, which I used mathematics to determine would have been in 1963. Remember, I'm playing in a world with no sliding timeline. Characters can and do age. Chris Claremont liked to use real-world history in the backstory of his characters, like Magneto in the Holocaust, or Storm in the Suez War. In Uncanny X-Men 99, Colossus says Mikhail died in an explosion at the Baikonur Cosmodrome. Hope I pronounced that right. There have been two catastrophes at the Cosmodrome, one in 1960, another in 1963. The 1960 incident was suppressed by the Soviet government until 1989, which makes me think Claremont intended for Mikhail to die in 1963. Vazhin Jr. knows Peter is a mutant, but doesn't tell his superiors, who suspect something is up and eventually name him a traitor. But the invasion happened in 1962, and Vazhin isn't being watched by his superiors until 1963. Why are our almost super soldiers spying on Vazhin Jr. in 1962? While they didn't have hard evidence he was disloyal, they must have had their suspicions before Vazhin knew Peter was a mutant. They asked other agents, hey, is Vazhin telling the truth? Our almost super soldiers are watching him when the invasion hits, and they make their public debut as heroes of the state, saving as much of the city as they can. Some of our enhanced agents die. They're strong, but they're not nearly in the same class as the heroes taking on the other ships around the world. And Moscow takes quite a bit of damage, but it could have been much worse. Much like in America, where Tony Stark is studying the alien technology they captured to use in case of another attack, Russia does the same. With most of the aeronautical scientists focusing their attention on the captured alien technology, the Baikonur explosion doesn't happen in 63. Mikhail Rasputin isn't sucked into another dimension and presumed dead. After the attack, one of the surviving almost supermen becomes the next Red Guardian. On Earth 616, the Russian government had no tolerance for mutants, but after the invasion, and with what was left of their eugenics experiments either washed out or killed, the Russian government wonders if they can continue what they've been doing, but incorporate mutants into their program. They're more desperate in this timeline than they were in Earth 616, and need all the assets they can find to protect their own. Mutants like Mikhail and eventually Peter would volunteer their services to protect their nation. Magneto and the X-Men more than likely have a Cerebro to locate mutants in danger, but this kinder, gentler machine gun Magneto doesn't want to go behind enemy lines in the middle of a Cold War. He would keep an eye on the Russians if they're building their own mutant militia, but he won't try to poach them for his own team. And that's it for this video. Hope you liked this one, and if you did, stick around. I'll hopefully have something else in this weird world in the future. Until then, have a good one.